Alrighty, hello everybody. In this video I will be covering the level 1 proofs from the review stations. During this video you should try to guess what I am going to say. I will give you opportunities to do so by telling you to pause, but you should really not wait for me. You should see if you can on your own come up with your own conclusions, come up with your own justifications. So, here we go. Number 1, we've got the givens here. Segment BD bisects angle ABC and angle ADC. Okay, so I will copy down that given. There's the given. I'm going to tackle this one at a time because I'm noticing here that I have this, so I'm going to chat while I'm doing this. I'm going to take this one at a time because I'm noticing that it's bisecting two different angles. So, my first conclusion is going to be that if we have BD bisecting angle ABC, then that would mean that BD is cutting angle ABC in half. So we get ABD and CBD. So those are my two angles. So back in here, I can get in that those two angles are congruent. ABD is congruent to angle CBD. Think of what the conclusion will be. If you want to pause the video, you can. Okay, if you wanted to, you could have this be all in one conclusion. We get another pair of angles congruent as well. So if it's cutting ADC in half, then we get ADB and CDB. Both of those right there. So I can put those in. ADB is congruent to CDB. Okay, I get both of those pairs of angles. If you wanted to, you could write two separate conclusions, but I think that'll be fine for our purposes. Okay, so now we're out of givens. We're all done with that given. We marked it on our diagram. When we're done with our givens, the only two things that we can get from our diagram are vertical angles and the reflexive property. So, you should hopefully notice here that we have the reflexive property right here in the center. So, I have that given in diagram. Conclusion is that BD is congruent to that because of the reflexive property. Alrighty, now we have three things congruent between these triangles. I didn't write my list here. Hopefully you know how to do that. So I am now able to state that these triangles are congruent. Hopefully you can also tell me by what triangle congruence are they congruent. So, conclusion. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CBD because of that would be angle side angle. There you go. Those two triangles are congruent. That's all. Okay. On the next one, I will put up the initial pieces. Okay. So let me pause this and get my corresponding parts down first. Okay. So I've got everything down here that I needed. I wrote my first and only given, if you'll notice here. So here we go. The keyword that you should be looking for here is what? Bisect each other. So on your website, you should go to where it says segments bisecting each other. Once you do that, you'll see that we get two sets of congruent segments because AG and NR are cutting each other in half. That means that we get AX congruent to GX and NX congruent to RX. They're cutting each other in half. So my conclusion here will be just that. There you have it. AX is congruent to GX, NX is congruent to RX, because segment bisectors create two congruent segments. So now I can mark these off from my list and check my given off. Okay, so now I'm out of givens. You should be thinking, okay, if I'm out of givens, what can I do? You can use the reflexive property or vertical angles. Which one do you see here? Well, you should see that we have the vertical angles right in the center here. That's the only thing that we can ever get from the diagram, along with the reflexive property. We couldn't just say that angle A is congruent to angle G. There's nothing telling us that that is the case. So, given in diagram, our conclusion will be that angle AXN, and I'm getting that from my list. Angle AXN is congruent to angle GXR because vertical angles are congruent. Sweet. Now I have three things checked off. And I have enough to prove these triangles congruent. So my conclusion here, and I'm hoping that you see the flow of this. It's given theorem conclusion, or given conclusion justification rather. So conclusion is that triangle ANX is congruent to triangle GRX because of which triangle congruence will it be? Well, it'll be side, angle, side. We have two sides congruent with an angle in between them. So there you go. Alrighty. Now, on to the next one. We are given that CD is an altitude in ACB. You should be thinking of what's the key word there. And then we have that AC is congruent to BC. So let me get my list down and my first given. Alrighty, there you have it. I've got all my segments, I've got all my angles, and I've got my first given. Now, altitude is one of our Tier 3 words. So you can go to the Tier 3 section of your website, look at what you have for altitude, and hopefully it is something along these lines. Conclusion. Our conclusion here, we need to say this before we say the last part, is that CD, overline, CD is perpendicular to AB because altitudes make perpendicular lines. Okay, so now we know that they are perpendicular. Perpendicular lines, well, what do perpendicular lines create? Perpendicular lines create congruent right angles. So the two angles that we're going to get congruent here, I'm looking at my list, are angle ADC and angle BDC. And now I can mark my diagram. So ADC is a right angle and BDC is a right angle. Done with that given. Alrighty, on to my next given. Let me copy that down. I copied my given down and I drew it on my diagram. Now, normally when they just tell us that things are congruent, that would be a freebie, right? Because that is one of the things in our list over here, that AC is congruent to BC. But what do we also get here? Well, we also get that this angle is congruent to this angle because this will now be an isosceles triangle. If you didn't see that, that's okay, because you could have used the reflexive property in the middle here and used hypotenuse leg for that. But it's good to get in the habit of checking to see if we have an isosceles triangle. If they tell you two things are congruent, check to see if you get an isosceles triangle because of that. So our conclusion here will be, what I'm going to use is that angle A is congruent to angle B because isosceles triangles have two congruent sides and two congruent angles. Two congruent angles. Alrighty, now I've got my three pieces. I'll circle my third piece over here. I'll check off that given. And I'm all set. I've got three things circled over here. So I should have enough to prove that these two triangles are congruent. And I do. So my final conclusion here is that triangle ADC is congruent to BDC because of what? Angle, angle, side. And there you go. Alrighty, last one. I'll pause the video, get all my givens down, and get my corresponding parts. Alrighty, looks like we do have a little bit of a typo here for one of these givens. So it should be angle EAB. It says triangle, but hopefully you notice that difference. So our conclusion here, the keyword here, the keyword that you should have gathered from that, so we're talking about an angle bisector here. What do angle bisectors create? Well, angle bisectors create two congruent angles. So the two congruent angles that we're going to get here are angle EAD and angle BAD. If we're cutting angle EAB in half, that would give us EAD and BAD. Remember, an angle bisector makes two congruent angles. So we get this angle, get this angle is congruent to this angle. Sweet. And I can check that off my list. One thing down. One thing to go. Two things to go. My next given is that FED is congruent to CBD. FED is right here. CBD is right here. The issue with that, if you're noticing, is that those are outside of our triangles. So you should be looking at your tier 3 word for supplementary angles. Our given is the same as that given there. Angle FED is congruent to angles CBD. Our conclusion will be, well, this angle is supplementary to AED, which is right here. This angle is supplementary to ABD, which is right here. So that's going to be our conclusion. Conclusion is AED is congruent to angle ABD because congruent angles have congruent supplements. Sweet. Alrighty, now I've got two things down, one thing to go. So that was this one. Alrighty, on to the next one. We're out of our givens. So that leaves us with either vertical angles or the reflexive property. Hopefully you're looking at this and going, oh yeah, we got the reflexive property. It's right there. So given in the diagram, we have that AD is congruent to AD. Because of the reflexive property. Sweet. So using my pen tool, I'm going to go yellow. It's a little bit different. Hopefully you guys don't get mad. So that one is congruent and that one is congruent. Oh, I forgot to mark these angles as well. So let's do this. Boom, boom. Boom, boom. Alrighty. Well, we got three things. Now we can prove these triangles congruent. Hopefully you can recognize the fact that this will be a certain type of triangle congruence. Which one will it be? Think of it while I'm typing this in. Oh, come on now. Giving you extra time to think about it. Because of angle, angle, side. We have two angles and then a side that are not between that angle, those two angles. So there you have it. That is all of the level 1 proofs. Just proving triangles congruent. The next thing, you do that, and then you say that the parts are congruent. That's level 2. See you in the next video.